Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here as usual with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And we have got a good guest for you this week. I know I say that every week, but it's always true. Our guests are awesome. Shelley Adina, she writes steampunk, and well, let me read the Amazon bio here to make it official, but just so you know, the topic today is going to be kind of like foreign translations, juggling a pen name, and keeping a 10-book series fresh and selling. We didn't actually tell Shelley what we're going to talk about, so this is news to her. All right, according to Amazon, she wrote her first novel at 13, has an MFA in writing popular fiction, and is now the author of 24 novels published by Harlequin, Time Warner, and Hachette Book Group, and several more published by Moonshell Books Incorporated, her own independent press. She writes romance, paranormals, and the Magnificent Devices Steampunk Adventure series under the name Adina Senft. That's the name for your romances, right? That's your romances, and then Shelley Adina is steampunk.
No, the Amish stuff is Adina Senft.
Okay. And also, Shelley is a world traveler who loves to imagine what might have been. Between books, she loves playing the piano and Celtic harp, making period costumes, quilting, and spoiling her flock of rescue chickens. All right, Shelley, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is fun so far.
I haven't mangled your names too badly.
You did really well. Of course, with a name like yours, you probably have lots of practice in that kind of thing.
Well, fortunately, my name is, if you get it pretty close, there aren't a lot of us out there, so you'll still find my webpage, so it's good.
Good.
All right, Shelley.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Shelley refused to bring some of the rescue chickens on to liven up the show. Apparently, they're not housebroken.
No.
So we're going to jump right into the interview portion here.
I used to have one that would sit on my shoulder, but not anymore.
Aw.
She would have been right in the frame.
It would have been a first on the show for sure. We have lots of dogs that like to chime in from now and then.
And then Cherie Priest brought her cats, and that was chaos because they were knocking stuff over. And so then I decided chicken's not so good.
Outdoors, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us about yourself and how you got started writing?
Well, way back in the dark ages, I started writing actually when I was 8 years old, as a lot of us do. It seems to kind of hit around 8 years old, and then you kind of get into it when you're a young teenager. And in my case, growing up in a plain church, I didn't have the high school social stuff that most people did, so I hung out in my room writing stories, and it just went on from there. I got a couple of degrees in writing, and then my MFA, and my master's thesis was a romance novel, which I sold to Harlequin in 2002, came out in 2003, and that was the beginning, 36 novels later.
Well, this sounds like it was a pretty good MFA program if they were cool with you writing a romance novel for your thesis.
Actually, there was an entire major for us romance novelists. There's science fiction, horror, mystery, romance, and there used to be children's, but now they kind of split YA over fantasy and science fiction and whatever subgenre it fits in. So my students are usually YA, fantasy. There's not too many romance this time, but it's kind of ebbing and flowing. So yes, you can be a romance major and you get total support.
Awesome. And yours was in writing popular fiction, so I guess that makes sense. Is that pretty common? I always hear from people that they like the literary fiction people best.
Well, I think the Seton Hill program is the only genre fiction program out there because, hey, we want to make money.
Definitely. You have to pay for those college loans somehow.
I know, and tuition and stuff, yeah. So when I saw that online, I was just kind of hunting around. I was going to do maybe the one at UCSF or some of those. There's a really good one at Antioch, but this one was totally focused on genre fiction, and that's where I have always been because the romance interests me, fantasy interests me, the adventure of it, the protagonist doing something, that kind of really appeals to me. And you find that mostly in genre fiction. So that's why I chose that degree, and it's been great. There's a huge community built around the program now, and we there's lifelong friends I've made there.
Nice. It sounds really fun. Yeah, you don't get as much like navel gazing in you know,
No,
you start with a
no.
body or an explosion or something
Yeah,
good.
yeah, or eyes meet across the room and all that stuff.
All right. Well, it sounds like you got your start with romance. What made you decide several years later to start a steampunk series that would grow into 10 novels?
Oh, serendipity, fate. I was writing for one of Harlequin's lines. I had done 6 or 7 books for them, and then I'd moved into the inspirational side, and that's a whole different market, and wrote a couple of women's fictions novels. And then, I've been a steampunk fan since the 60s, James West and Artemis Gordon in the Wild Wild West. When we didn't play house ever as kids, we were like replaying the episodes of the Wild Wild West and pirates and orphans and stuff, and we never had any parents when we were playing house, so it had been sticking with me since the 60s. And then I some of the reading in our program was steampunk related, and I kind of got the bug again. So I wrote this fish out of water story that was kind of a little, what the Victorians used to call a trifle. And it was about 55,000 words, and I sent it to my agent and I said, see if you can sell this. It was my MFA thesis. I went through the program twice. But the first time it was a MA, and then I came back when it got reaccredited as an MFA. So I did 2 theses. My second one was Lady of Devices, and so my agent sent it out to 10 publishers and they all turned it down. And the reason was they didn't know how to market it. Well, this is 2010, for gosh sakes. You know what was happening then? Steampunk was coming out of the underground and it was everywhere, and they didn't know how to market it. So I said, heck with that, I'll do it myself. So I took it back and put a great cover on it and put it up, and maybe 3 books. By the time Magnificent Devices, the book, came out, it was making me a couple of hundred a month. And then by the time book 5 came out, we were making like 4 figures a month. And then it just kept going. And so it was like, okay, I don't have time to go to work, so I'm going to quit my day job. So I did that in 2012, and it was just, I formed my own corporation in 2013, and here we are. I'll be starting book 11. Book 10 just came out. I'll be starting book 11 in the summer.
Awesome. Now, does that mean that your romance novels were not quite as, well, they probably sold more copies, but you got less of it? Is that kind of how it worked?
That is kind of how it works. I could sell 80,000 copies of a romance novel, and I got a quarter a book. So, that was okay. They were Harlequins. They're like a magazine. They're out for 30 days and then they go away. So you snag your money while you can, but you have to keep writing them. This people say, "Oh, you're so prolific doing 3 books a year," but I was trained at Harlequin, and that's the expectation. 2 is the minimum number that you do there. And so that's the pace I was trained to do, and so that's what I do.
Have you thought of doing any romance on your own under your self-published imprint?
I have, and I do. In fact, my MA thesis, which was called "Caught You Looking," I got the rights back to that and put it out myself. And now I have just this morning gotten the rights back to 3 more. So I will be putting those out under the same brand and set in the same town and all that. So it's really fun. I've been dancing around all day. I'm so happy.
Awesome. I hope that goes well for you.
Yeah.
Have you had any trouble, like, I don't know, you're kind of writing a lot of different genres. Are you having any trouble keeping like your author voice consistent and, any trouble jumping between, they seem like really different series. So,
They are really different series. But it's kind of like a vacation for the brain. By the time I'm finished a steampunk book, my Victorian language and my brain, because you form sentences in a different order when you're using the Victorian language. You use different vocabulary. It's tiring. And so by the time I'm ready to switch over to an Amish novel, they're much more, I don't want to say simple because that's not true, and you still have the language thing because I'm bringing in phrases from Pennsylvania Dutch and working out the German. And so that there's that, but it's different. it's sort of a calm. There's no explosions. It's a calmer environment. The cast is just as big because I don't know, somehow the ensemble cast seems to be what I do. But I don't know, it's just different. It's a different flavor. It's like, orange cream instead of chocolate.
All right. Well, I'm a little disappointed to hear that the milk sheds aren't blowing up and nothing's like that is going on. But
Only if you don't clear out your manure pit.
yeah, I've heard that methane can be problematic.
Very bad.
All right. Well, let me hand you to the guys to ask some questions too before we get into the marketing stuff a little later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to start things off. Mostly, I'm interested in you have translations now. You have at least one. I think you said right before we started that you have two now.
Yep. The second, Her Own Devices, has been translated. Its new title is Die Antriebstarke Lady.
Nice. Yeah, I had a translation, and it went from the Book of Deacon to Der Ewige Krieg, which the perpetual war it's supposed to be, because that's a thing within the book. But so this is your self-published. You self-published these books, and the translation. Did you spearhead that yourself?
Yes, I actually have a friend called Liz Jennings who is the part owner in a translation company. She lives in Italy, and she runs the Women's Fiction Festival over there every year. And so she got me together with her partner, Athena Pappas, and it's called Language Plus Literary. And my books cost about $6,000 to do a translation, but they are very good translations. I have run them past German speakers, and they say, you've gotten a really good one here.
That's good to hear. That was actually the next question I was going to ask is how you would check. Do you have a functional language of German, but you ran them by German speakers, so that's good to know.
I have tourist level German. I can, ask where the bathroom is, and I can order up a white wine and a sausage. But the thing is, you can recognize your own story if you have enough base words in German. So I know what's happening. I know that they haven't chopped pieces out of it, but the actual expression, like my translator, the children in the Mopsies and the other children in the street gang, they're Cockney. And so my translator said, we have an equivalent to Cockneys. There's like a working man's dialect from the Ruhr Valley. Would it be okay if we use that to designate the different way that they speak? And I said, hey, fill your boots, go right ahead. And I can see it on the page. It's very different from High German.
I love that. Like I remember hearing stories about when they translate Pixar over into other places, like whatever. This character has an Italian accent in an American setting, so in the Italian translation, we need to choose a portion of Italy that is representative of that attitude. Like again, that's a very good indicator of a good translator, I'd imagine.
Because imagine being so familiar with dialect that you could just pull that out of the air and have that knowledge. My gosh.
Yeah, that's fascinating. How's the translation been performing? Like, are you happy you did it? Well, you're doing a second one, so presumably it went reasonably well.
Well, the thing about, as we all know, the thing about sales is series. That's the key. So I want to get the first 4 done before I make any judgments about how they're doing. I will say that they sell like 6 times better in print than they do in digital.
Interesting.
I think it's just a function of the German reader. They're used to reading in print, and I'm like, okay, here comes a print book for you.
It's excellent. It's good to know, actually. I have a German translation. To my knowledge, it's ebook only. It's been doing reasonably well, but I should really have a word with the publisher and see if they do any paperback, because I've found that different regions tend to have different preferences when it comes to how they read their books. Like I've run into a lot of situations where audiobooks are much more popular in certain areas than others. So yeah, that's good to know. But really, this is a fairly efficient question asking on this part because we got through all 3 of mine in a hurry.
Well, I have something else to share.
Oh,
I go to Germany every other year just because I buy clothes over there. I am a perfect German size, whereas in the States I can't get anything to fit. So anyway, aside from that, I go over there and I talk to people about reading. And we were riding on a bus one day, and this young man had his Kindle reader. And so I poked my nose into his business and asked him what he was reading. And he said, I'm reading an English book. And I said, wouldn't you read the German version? And he said, no. Many of us would rather go to language school and learn English than read the translations that are so poor over here. And I thought to myself, wow, because I do sell in English in Germany, but I think I'm selling better in German print. Maybe the word is getting out that the translation is really good. It's hard to know, but I want to keep everybody happy. So, and German is my best European market, so I'm going to make the effort to try and reach them.
Yeah, I have found that Germany seems to be a really excellent market for fantasy and sci-fi in all of their forms. And as you say, even before I had a translation, Germany was definitely the best-selling non-English market that I had. So now I know that they are such avid readers; they're willing to learn a new language in order to get more fiction to dig into.
Isn't that amazing? Oh, that we could all be like that.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes my questions, so I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for a few more.
Okay.
Alrighty. From reading your bio and some of the interviews that you've given, I see that you have not one but several different pseudonyms. How do you encourage readers of your different series to give each of the other series a try?
There is pretty much zero crossover. You cultivate an entirely different audience in steampunk than you would encourage in Amish fiction, because Amish fiction is pretty much exclusive to the Christian market. It doesn't really exist outside what they call the CBA, Christian Booksellers Association. So I was writing for, here's Lindsay writing me notes in German. I was writing for a CBA publisher and doing Amish fiction for them because I grew up playing and it seemed like a natural sort of choice. But nothing that I did in that market would cross over, to my knowledge, to the ABA fantasy and science fiction market there. And romance, sometimes they'll go for the steampunk because there is a romance thread in it, but it's only CBA romance that will read Amish fiction. So there's this big old divide in between them, and never the twain shall meet.
So you don't even bother trying. It's like, the readers of this genre probably wouldn't go for this one, so don't even bother trying. Just pretty much cultivate each set of readers based on each genre. Is that it?
Well, I do send out my newsletter with news about both things to everybody. I don't split my newsletters. It's like, okay, if you like me, maybe you would like the Amish, or maybe you like the steampunk, maybe you'd like the romance, because it's all the same author. But I know how I am. I love Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden, and I like his new steampunk book, but I don't read the fantasy. Even maybe I'd like it, but I just haven't picked it up. So it's even with one author that you really like, you may not transfer over to their other books just for whatever reason. I can't even articulate why that might be. But just in case there is somebody that does, I send my newsletter to everybody.
So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, you don't have a separate newsletter for each group of books. You just one that encompasses all of them. Okay.
I've had so many pseudonyms. I've had 4 so far. I'm down to 2. I'm trying to simplify. If there was any way that I could join my websites together, I would, but it doesn't really make sense.
All right, and that actually ties into my next question: is what was your motivating factor with your decision to write under a pen name? Why did you decide to create a pen name?
Yeah, it originally started back in like 2007 with Hachette when I was writing for them. I had done a number of books under my married name. And then those were women's fictions. And so you know how they are. They say, if you're going to write for a different genre, we don't want to confuse the readers. Like if you're moving into YA, that would confuse them from women's fiction. Don't ask me why. So you need to take a new name. So I said, okay, fine, let's use my 2 front names. So Shelley Adina became my pseudonym for that. And then when I started doing Amish fiction, we can't get the Amish fiction confused with the contemporary YA. So let's take another name. So it's like, okay, well, I'll use my Adina and then my maiden name, which is Senft, which is High German, by golly, and here's this German culture, and I grew up playing, and so it all kind of fits together. So, but nobody can pronounce it.
Lindsay, excuse me.
She did really well. So basically, it was the publisher that caused that division in the names, and once I got rid of the two that were outstanding, I now have just this. Shelley Adina is everything but Amish. That's how I'm differentiating. I'm trying to simplify.
Would you recommend for any author contemplating a change of genre to do the same?
No.
That was quick. Okay.
Because people aren't stupid. They can tell by the covers that, yes, the genre has changed. Now, oh, gee, it's black and there's a vampire on it. And before you were writing like contemporary YA with girls in big dresses, I think this is going to be a different kind of book. They can figure that out just from looking at it. Pick up the book, look at the back cover copy. If they like your voice, maybe they'll transfer over, or maybe they'll just wait for the next YA with the big dress to come out. Who knows? But I believe that you can differentiate through packaging instead of confusing everybody with another name, having to start all over from scratch with, social media, website, figuring out your brand. Oh, what a pain. Yeah, if I could advise someone starting fresh, just pick a name and stick with it.
Okay, and see, you pretty much already covered my next question, which was how did you come up with your pen name? It sounds like you kept creating different variations based on your actual name.
Yeah, because when somebody calls me, I want to turn around and answer. The first pseudonym I had wasn't any of my names, and it was really hard because the bookstore manager would holler at you and you wouldn't answer, and then they'd think you were a snot, so that's not very good.
Interesting there. I was gonna say, when you created that particular pseudonym, the pen name there, and it wasn't based off your actual name. I mean, did you actually do any research to see if, let's just say, a person actually existed by that name?
Oh yeah, I do. For all my names, I do that. In fact, if I had been asked to come up with another one, I had researched my Adina name with a different surname, and it turns out she's a stripper, so there went that idea.
Yeah, okay, important safety tip. When you're researching a safe pen name, Google it just to see what comes up.
Even book series names. I Google the series name, I Google titles just to make sure there aren't any weirdnesses out there that my stuff would then get attached to for eternity.
Good to know. Alrighty, let me pass you back over to Lindsay, who's got another batch of questions for you.
I should also add on there as a tip to listeners that you should Google your main characters' names in your books before you commit to them also. As someone who speaks German, have you heard Sardell before?
No.
Apparently means anchovy. It's the heroine in my steampunk series. No. Many German readers, or maybe it's sardine, anchovy, one of those. Many German readers have told me, hey, did you know?
Oh, so sad.
Yeah, I know now. In the future, I will double check before. You think you just bash some letters on a keyboard that you're safe, but
yeah, and you think you made it up. This is original.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Alrighty. So you've just recently released your 10th book in your Magnificent Devices series. How are you going about keeping the series fresh and making sure the books continue to sell?
Well, I can tell you the answer to the first one. I keep them fresh by kind of thinking of the story in segments. And so the first 4 books were a long way of telling one adventure. And the next 2 books were about the two twin sisters. The next 2 books were about a couple of the ancillary characters and sort of wrapping up the big bad that had been increasing in size throughout about the last, 6 of the 8 books. So we got the big bad dealt with, and his death actually turned into a springboard for his daughter to then have her own mini-series. So book 10, I did a little novella that was kind of a bridge between the 8-book set and her new 3-book set. That was Devices Brightly Shining, just a little Christmas trifle. And then I moved into her trilogy where she is now going to go and stop the war that her father started, and that's going to take me probably 3 books. It may take 4, but I'm hoping only 3. And so after that, once that is taken care of, there's room for novellas for some of the other strong female characters. And then in the back of my mind, I really want to go back to 1807 because the steam engine was invented during the Regency, and I want to do pretty punk. I want to dress in those costumes. I have to figure out how to put goggles on a bonnet, but by golly, I want to write those books.
You're much more into the clothing aspect than I am.
I really am.
I was like, I can't do Victorian anything. Let me take it out to the Old West where they were just out mining for gold and wearing jeans.
That's
the
it.
first denim.
Strap a revolver to your hip and go.
Exactly. That's sexy, man. Who doesn't love revolvers? All right. Now I have to ask, have you been tempted at all? Do you make it so it kind of sounds like, just looking at the series, that people probably have to jump in at book 1 and read through, or do you design it so other books can be picked up?
There's kind of breaks. In fact, the breaks are where I put them in box sets, oddly enough. So book 1 to 4 is in a box set, books 5 and 6 are in a box set, 7 and 8 will be coming out in the summer in a box set. So those are kind of, if you're going to jump in, the breaks are sort of delineated already. Or, the first book is free, so it's a good starting point.
Right. I've heard some people talk about lately that Amazon's not necessarily maybe promoting later books in a series as much. I think Ed Robertson was talking about this on the self-publishing podcast, that he's got into like 7 and 8 in his series, and he decided, it's better to start some new trilogy or something, because when you put out like the 10th book or whatever, then you've only got your diehard fans, because the new readers can maybe be turned off and not pick up book 10. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that you're still getting a lot of people checking out the freebie and moving through the whole series?
Yeah, I do. I think the freebie is, because I get lots of reader letters about the freebie, and then and especially if I do an ad or something, the read through is really strong. So I think there may be something to it, and I can certainly see the logic to what he's saying, and possibly I think that's kind of why I left it at 8 books, then the little novella, and then now this is kind of a fresh thing. The covers are different but the same. So instead of having the Art Nouveau frame around the covers in kind of a cobalt blue, they're brass. So the figure on the front is very different from the figures on the first ones. So I kind of tried to make it plain through packaging that this was its own little thing, even though it has deep roots in the previous series.
Sounds good. And one of the great things about science fiction and fantasy, too, is I think you really do get those loyal fans that they will read through 10 books and want more. So it's good career, good for steady income, to have it
Bless
out.
their hearts. And they write and they tell me, oh, I read it comes out on Wednesday, and Thursday they write to me, oh, it was so good, when's the next one? It's like, dude, I haven't even had my champagne yet.
I'm in Germany buying clothes. I haven't started plotting it yet.
Give me a break. I'm off buying my finish the damn book present.
I have to say, you gave me an idea. I never thought of clothes shopping while on vacation, but my dad I'm German, half German, so maybe I would fit better over there. We're stocky people, no scrawny little.
Yep, exactly. There's no such thing as a size 2 over there. Come on with me. I'll show you the best places.
Awesome. I look forward to it. All right. So you've been writing and publishing for a while now. You've got a lot of books out. What have you found that's been effective over the years when it comes to marketing?
Ooh, well, there's like the previous life with the publisher's marketing efforts. And in that world, I found the best thing to do was to make friends with booksellers. And that means every time I go out, I hit a bookstore and talk to the manager. Have I signed the stock here yet? Can I go and sign this? And can I bring you a cookie or whatever? On all our vacations, they are signing safaris. So we like to go to New Mexico. We like to go to Canada. Every time we do that, we hit all the Walmarts, all the bookshops, all the Barnes & Nobles, and we sign stock all the way down the road, which helps to make it partly tax deductible, but at the same time, you're building these networks of bookstores that recognize you time after time. So that's sort of traditional world. In indie world, I can make those connections online. I can be myself on Facebook with, Downton Abbey and chickens and costuming and goofing off. And oh, by the way, I'm going to have a new release next month. And you know how it goes. I have my newsletter where it's not just, here's the new releases, but, here's some little tidbit of information that somehow relates to the story. I find that being personable and interested in readers' lives and checking in with the people who come back and comment on your Facebook page, the people who are interested in your life, maybe that's my core little tribe. And so I just try and build it person by person, because the landscape is so vast that you kind of have to start with the general store and work outward.
All right, so when I see you cruising through Arizona, it'll be tax deductible and you're just on your way to the bookstore.
Yes, you'll find me there. We'll be in the truck and the Airstream that has the license plate SLVRZEP.
Nice.
Our silver Zeppelin, you bet.
All right, well, I'd like to ask you, a lot of authors these days are choosing not to blog in favor of just concentrating on writing the next book, but you seem to blog fairly often. Have you found that an effective way for marketing, or is it just something you enjoy doing?
I used to think that I was the world's worst blogger because it was like, oh, I've got nothing to say. That's like the thing that stops people the most. But I'm finding that it's another avenue to reach people, because suddenly 3,000 people were following my blog. I'm like, oh, I guess I better say something, but what can I say that's interesting? But what they're interested in is the world. So I can use the blog as like an extension of my world and talk about scenery, and here's my pictures from Page, Arizona, and the Antelope Canyon, which features heavily in book 10. And here, imagine yourself in my character's position as she's running down this amazing canyon, and it kind of brings people into what I see in my head because we oddly enough make a point of going to locations that are in my books for our vacations. And so I can bring readers in by sharing my trips with them, and that's stuff to blog about. And since I kind of came to that realization that it's the world we're building with our website and our blog and our social media that counts, and not so much, I don't know, my thoughts on politics or whatever, that doesn't really matter to my readers. What they want to do is come in and spend some time in the world. So it's been so much easier since then, because I spend a lot of time there anyway.
Nice. I'm still trying to figure out the series I can write that would let me go to Vail and Telluride and Aspen and write these office tax deductions. And dragons solving mysteries in ski resorts or something.
Well, there's all these volcanoes out here, and you could have dragons and volcanoes, and it's in the West, and you could work with it.
All right. Me and my accountant will figure it out in the future.
My accountant gave me the green light. You're fine.
Awesome. All right. You mentioned that in the past that you've done letters from characters on your blog, is something, because I think people who write fiction often struggle with, especially if you're setting it in a different world. What am I going to write about on my blog? Could you talk about what you did there a little bit?
Well, it was a bright idea that I got so busy that I kind of dropped it in the middle. But anyway, the theory behind it was there were events that happened. There's a 5-year interval between book 4 and book 5. When the young twins, they're 11, and then in book 5 they're 16. And so the letters were kind of to say what happened during that 5-year interval. My character was going to university. The people who tried to kick them off their property on the banks of the Thames in Vauxhall Gardens, how did they get back at them and give them their comeuppance? And so I started writing these letters because I knew that part of the flock, the kids, the street kids, would be writing letters to my main character in Germany. So it seemed, in theory, it was great, but then I got so overwhelmed with the production process, self-publishing, that I kind of dropped it. But now what I need to do now is go back and do a story arc. I was at Steampunk Unlimited out in Pennsylvania in October, and the authors get a caboose in which to receive guests. And so people would come in and talk to me about my books. And so we were sitting around and somebody said, what happened to the letters from the lady? Because I was really enjoying those. And I'm like, oh, I came to a grinding halt because I had this plot problem. So there we were sitting in the caboose in full costume, all of us brainstorming what was going to happen in this little story arc. The readers are so invested. And so then I came home and thought, you know what, I better get back and get this little series of epistolary series going, because clearly people want to know, and it's fun, and it's certainly going to save me from having to flail around figuring out what to write. I just need to write the next letter.
Nice. And I know that too, people will ask about like, what should I, we always say like send your newsletter out every month or so they don't forget about you. And people that are writing maybe 2 books a year, they're like, what the heck do I talk about between books? But if you throw a little letter or
throw a letter in there.
Yeah, or a little bonus scene or something that you put up on your blog, it gives you a reason to like say, hey, this is what I've been up to, and new books coming in 2 months, but I hope you enjoyed this in the meantime.
Exactly. And also, if people sign up for my newsletter, they get a free short story which explains an incident that happened back in book 2. So because it was never explained what happened, the young boy was kidnapped, but it's the story of the kidnapping. So that's a little bit of a draw. And my newsletter signups went up exponentially after that. So clearly readers really cared about what happened to them.
Yeah, I still need to get around to writing something just for the newsletters, but I have so many series going now. I'm like, I don't even know what people want, It's like, are you here because of this series or this series? I don't know.
Maybe you have to rotate them.
Free this month.
Yeah.
All right, so I was kind of wondering, you've been talking about the cons a little bit, and that you've gone to Euro SteamCon. Is that just from... Go ahead.
I did that via Google Hangout. I was tempted to go over there.
Oh.
I didn't do it for that one, but this year in April, I'm going to the Paris Readers and Bloggers event on April 20th and 21st. And then on the 23rd and 24th, it's Love Letter in Berlin. So I'm going to go to both of them and meet some European readers.
Nice. So are these your books are just doing this well, or are you like a trust child that has all this traveling money? Because I think our listeners are going to be like, well, it must be nice. This is what you get after 30 books or so?
But yeah, financial management has been good to us, so I can do that. And I don't want to sound like a snot, but holy cow, this is like living the dream. But so I want to go over there and make, do business there. And I also was in contact with the French steampunks, and they gave me some ideas about things to see, things to photograph, things to maybe bring into stories and experiences. So that was very cool.
It does sound like a lot of fun. Do you actually feel that you're able to sell more books because of actually going to these cons and talking to people?
I think so, because they come to talk to me, and I love talking to them. And they'll flat out say, I drove here from Maryland because I heard you were going to be here. And after I picked myself up off the floor, I was just thrilled. And so I was happy to spend time at the con and go to the big Victorian dance and dance with my readers. It was really great. I'm hoping that happens over at some of the other ones I'm doing. I'm going to AnomalyCon in March in Denver, and I'm really looking forward to meeting readers, and I know a bunch of the people on the panel, so that'll be fun. It'll be fun to see friends again.
All right, it does sound fun. So last question from me. I noticed when I was looking on your Amazon page, I think you're the first author I've come across with this. It actually shows events that you're going to be going to in the next month. Is that something that you're able to update through Author Central, or where are you going for that? Okay.
Author Central, there's a panel that you can fill in all your dates, and it shows up there. And I also have a calendar on my blog and my website, just because people are interested. I teach a lot. I teach a lot of writing craft classes, and so aspiring writers often will write to me, well, when's the next thing that you're teaching? And I can just direct them to the blog, and there's the schedule a year in advance.
No, that's great that they have it up there, and that of course you have it on your blog, because I always wonder, like, if you went to one of these things, how would I let people know other than the people that are hardcore enough to sign up for the newsletter. So.
Yeah. Well, I hope that when the conference organizer, when they're doing their publicity and stuff, they get people excited. And you know what steampunk is like. It's a smaller world than the giant world of science fiction and fantasy, and there's lots of authors that have readers in common. So I think if they just let them know, the word gets out and the readers will come. I hope anyway.
All right, cool. I hope it goes well. Let me hand you back to Jeff, or I think Joe's next, can ask a few more questions.
Okay.
Yep. So I was doing some furious note taking during during Lindsay's questions, because several of my questions were answered during Lindsay's questions. But
no. And I talk really fast. I'm sorry.
That's no problem. So again, you've got a 10-book deep series at this point, and as you went over earlier, an ongoing story like that can be tricky. It sounds like you collect them into groups of 2 or 3 or 4, like smaller arcs.
Yeah.
How much effort do you put into tying arcs to each other? Like, are they reasonably self-contained, or are people rewarded with callbacks to earlier arcs?
The latter. I make sure that even though there's been a 5-year break and these are characters that we've met before, but they were little girls, that there are callbacks to what happened before, because in conversation something will come up and a person will say, well, that isn't true, because when we were in such and such you did this, and everybody who has read such and such will remember that. So I do callbacks. I do a little bit of backstory weaving in the beginning, so that it kind of grounds somebody who's coming in new, but I'm hoping that people will stick with it through the whole thing, so I try not to be too heavy-handed with the backstory, just because it annoys people who are familiar with it, and I'm not sure how much good it does for people who are new.
Yeah, that's definitely a tricky thing that I've found. Like, I don't do a tremendous amount of reestablishing, because most of my stuff is pretty directly lead on, and I can't really support someone entering in the center. But I've read plenty of series where it gets 15 stories deep, and every now and then you have to relearn everything about this guy's apartment.
Right. Or a book that I just finished reading, they dropped you in chapter 1, page 1, in the middle of a conversation that was clearly continued from the previous book. And
That's
I
rough.
didn't think that was fair, because it took me probably a good 3 chapters before I figured out who these people were and what they were doing there and what the central conflict even was.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance to maintain.
It is. And then I guess that's where our basic our grasp of craft really starts to matter. Is how can you draw a person's imagination in when you have different demographics to try and please. And so that it's tricky. But hey, you can only do what you can do and hope that they forgive you.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like readers are becoming more savvy now, and they sort of understand the necessary parts of trying to cast a wide enough net for everyone.
Yeah, I think so, especially the voracious ones. I mean, they've pretty much got it down.
Yeah. All right, another thing is, it's been said that there comes a point in any long-running series when the last interesting thing you can do is destroy a piece of it. I'm not going to ask you to spoil anything, although there was a brief spoiler earlier. What are your thoughts on killing off characters or similar in order to shake things up?
I have killed off one character, and to this day, 7 books later, people are still saying, oh, I think he's coming back. No, he can't be dead. He's going to come back at the worst possible moment and mess everything up. I'm just waiting for it to happen. And I'm like, folks, he's not coming back. There was pieces of him scattered over an acre. It's not going to happen.
That's excellent. Yeah, I've had a similar experience where it's gone both ways. I've had characters that weren't really dead, and I've had characters that I intend for them to be really dead, but people don't seem to agree with me.
There's that. So the big bad, I thought, was dead at the end of book 5, but then he kept cropping up, and I realized that he was not indeed dead, and so I had to kill him off on stage just to make sure that okay, now this arc is done. We're moving on.
That's definitely an important lesson to learn. If you are writing a book, don't kill someone off in a way that they die off camera or off page, because people will
Right.
never believe that they're dead.
Yeah, it's the supernatural thing. It's the X-Files thing. You know, if you don't see it happen, and sometimes even if you do, like the smoking man, what is he doing back? I saw that guy burn to a crisp, and here he is.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I love it. That's the best part about genre fiction, and now comic book movies is that people just, you don't even really have to explain it half the time. People will just accept that eventually there will be an explanation.
It was a reactor explosion, you know.
All right.
One little thing. Sorry, just
Go ahead.
not to derail you, but one little thing. The next little trilogy, there's consequences to what happens to big bads, and so cleaning up the consequences can be like a plot of a book in itself. So that's kind of where I went with that. That stuff just doesn't happen in a vacuum, and oh, now everything's going to be happily ever after. There's a mess left behind, and you know, personal responsibility comes in, and a person has to grow a spine and deal with what they're left, and so that becomes the plot of the next trilogy, and that kind of makes me happy because that's what it's like in real life.
Yeah, yeah, that's something that I actually grappled with in what I was writing recently. But like, when you've got something that would have sort of a societal momentum to it, it's been driving a world for a period of time, and then suddenly it ends, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, it's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna just there's not gonna be a clean cut.
Exactly.
And it's definitely an interesting thing to explore in writing.
Even if we don't build another Death Star, we can still have consequences to the explosion of the first one, or the
Yeah,
second one, or the
Endor certainly didn't figure well in that.
yeah, exactly.
All right, so just one more question from me. You talked a little bit about this earlier, but when you release a new release in your series, you had said that you still funnel people back to the freebie, and you see a lot of read through. Do you see an overall spike in your complete series sales when you release a new book, or do you find that the funnel through from the beginning is based on promo, and the new books are just their own sales?
I find that there's like a core tribe of like 1,000 people that on the first day they're like jumping on the new book because they've been waiting for it, and then it just kind of builds, and I think the core is what travels along with me, and then the new readers who come in via the first freebie, they're a little slower, but I can see it's kind of like the gopher inside the rattlesnake. I can see the hump after, like, you do a BookBub ad or something. You can see the gopher traveling through the series, and so by that time maybe there's a new release, and it's if you schedule your BookBub just about the time that they would need to read the next book, then that makes them happy and it increases the sales for the next book. In fact, that's one of the strategies I used when book 5 came out. I put books 1 to 4 box set on sale for 99 cents and had this amazing response from a BookBub ad, and then bam-a-lam, there was book 5 ready for them to buy.
That's definitely an excellent way to go about it. I find that I've attempted to do that, and BookBub ads being as hard as they are to get, it's hard to do anyway. But also calibrating how fast I think people are going to read is very difficult.
Well, if you're like me and you're a book hoarder, it could be like 2 years before you open the book. But I'm finding that many of them do just continue on because there's bless their heart, there is somebody in the Netherlands who buys them one at a time, following all the way through the series. It's wonderful.
That's excellent. All right, yeah. So that answers my questions. I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for the last set.
Okay.
Alrighty, for your self-pub titles, what would you say is the most underrated marketing tool at your disposal that you feel more indie authors should be taking advantage of?
Ooh, you're talking to the person who's probably not the marketing powerhouse. It continues to amaze me that people don't use their newsletter, that it never occurs to them to start one. And it from the people that I've been able to interact with who have signed up for mine, it's like, wow, why would you want to short yourself on so many nice people and friends? So I think that, we all writers, we talk among ourselves about, the importance of the newsletter, because it's people who all on one day get to hear about a new release and hopefully go and buy it. But I think newer writers coming in don't realize that this easy, straightforward tool that you can do right there in your office is available to them, and you solicit your friends and your mom and dad and your teachers and stuff, and then it builds from there. But I think that is probably an underrated tool, even though it may not seem that way to the four of us or to many of the listeners. But for newer writers, I've seen it, and it's like, wow, I think I better get the word out about this to my students because it's so important.
Yeah, any friend of mine or any acquaintance that I know that's also an indie author, I always say the same thing too: is don't do what I did. I waited too long. I mean, well, back when my books just blew up, and I was getting just thousands of downloads a month. I'm like,
Wow.
why didn't I start the stupid newsletter then? I mean, and it wasn't until not that long ago, I'll say less than 2 years ago, I was like, all right, I'll just go ahead and do it. And now I see the advantages. I was like, why didn't I do it? I should have done it. But
And also inviting someone to sign up for your newsletter in the front and in the back of every release, and giving them a link to click so they can go and do that. Make it one-stop shopping, and then they can be involved in the world and they can hear about it. And here's when the next one's coming out, and you'll know because you'll be on the front lines. So that's another tool that I use. Just communication. Who knew?
Yeah, and actually that ties into my good question. There is, I heard you mention that you offer a free short story for those that actually sign up. I mean, is there any other incentives that you give out to people to try and increase your newsletter subscriptions? Or, I mean, what have you found has been the most effective?
Mostly the short story. I tried offering audiobook codes, and I've been doing the books 5 and 6 are with Blackstone Audio, and so they actually give you box sets of CDs, and so I offered those on the blog, and I think the most response has been for the short story. I guess because it's sort of non-intrusive and you can enjoy it when you have a minute, and there's no obligation, and it's very painless to just go and read a little short story. So I think that's part of what it is there's no effort required.
Yeah, I did something similar. That was one of the first things I did to try and increase it myself. Is talking to somebody and said, oh yeah, let's go ahead and just people love free stuff, so just offer it somewhere on your blog that says, hey, if you sign up, I'll give you a free short story. I'm like, all right, I can do that. I had a short story I hadn't published, put it on there, and it just exploded with subscriptions. I'm like,
yeah,
now we're talking.
Yeah, I get it now.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, my final question for you is one of my favorite. I always like asking people, what piece of advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time and encounter a younger, inexperienced version of yourself?
I would say get the education in the craft sooner. I get students writing to me from the universities where I've gone, because I'm on these alumni helping out the newer students, and invariably the advice that I give them is, here's the books to read, here's the places to go and get yourself educated, and sit down and write what you're passionate about, and make an effort sooner to get your craft down, because everybody's first novel is kind of an experiment, and there's a lot of Mary Sue going on in a first novel. But if you've got the craft, you could make Mary Sue really interesting and compelling. And so I think that's probably what I would have told myself, is get the craft sooner, get it down sooner.
Alrighty, yeah, it always varies. There's a lot of people that say, oh God, don't do this, or you see this person, just go the other direction, or if this person says, hey, let's collaborate, by all means don't, but that is good advice. All right, let me pass you back over to Lindsay. We'll see if we can wrap this up.
Okay.
All right, I'm just over here typing up the show notes. All right, no, we just were wondering if there's any other advice you haven't given yet that you would like to give to newer authors.
Well, if you're starting out on the self-publishing trail, I would say, like I said, get your craft down and look at satisfying different groups of readers. People do digital books, and it never occurs to them to do print books. But there's a whole demographic of print people that don't read on Kindle, and so why not share your stories with them? Why not invite them into your world to play? And there's bunches of people who don't read at all. They listen to their books. So look into audiobooks. My husband is a sound guy. He's the sound guy for a band. He's been building stages his whole life. He doesn't read books, but listening to them is a whole different experience. It just plunges him into the world. Of course, my narrator on the Magnificent Devices books is an English actress called Fiona Hardingham, and she does all the voices, and she's completely amazing. And so when he drops into the world, it's because she's creating people along with the words that I've written, and together it's making a whole different experience. So if you can, look into audio and invite those people into your world as well.
And are you using ACX to do your audios books?
The first 4 were with ACX, and then they dropped the royalty to 40%, and I got sort of annoyed about that, and so I went to Blackstone, and they also have a 40% royalty, but they're in retail and libraries, and they have CD box sets, which to me offset the 10% that I wasn't going to get. And they've been wonderful to work with.
All right, sounds good. That's what you get to do after you have a successful series, is just go out there and proposition publishers.
Well, I heard about one of the other authors, S.E. Oh God, I just blanked on her name. Anyway, she went to Blackstone, and they're just up in Ashland, Oregon. So I drove up there and met with the VP, and she said, "This is what we can do for distribution only. It wasn't even a publishing deal. It's self-publishing, and they do the distribution." So I send them my files, same as I would to ACX, and they do the pressing and the packaging, and it's fabulous, and they're so nice.
All right, sounds like a great deal.
It is.
All right, let's close up and let people know where your website is and if there's a first book you want them to check out.
My website is www.shelleyadina.com, Shelley with an EY. I'm kind of like Anna Green Gables. I have to have my E. And the freebie is the first book in the series, Lady of Devices, and it's about 50,000 words. Won't take you too long, and I hope you like it.
All right, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for all the info, Shelley. It was nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Yep. All right. So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.